What's up? I decided I wanted to do a series of videos on my video game collection. I decided I wanted to start from the oldest, which is my Atari 2600. And I realized that each one of my video game systems has a story that goes along with it, of how I got it, good memories that I have with it. So I figured I'd make videos about the system itself, take it apart, give it a little TLC, maybe show some video game footage. Alright, let's go. Alright. Well, so as you can see, this thing is in pretty good shape. Whoever had this before me took pretty good care of it, and it looks great. No serious scuffs or scratches, dents or dings. Everything's still functioning. There is one thing. I had a pet guinea pig when I was growing up. And if you know anything about guinea pigs, you know that they love to chew electrical wires. And she got a hold of this thing and chewed it up. It does still work because I've used it. But I would like to try and fix this somehow if I can. Maybe some liquid rubber or something. Alright, you're going to start by flipping it over. And there are 4 screws here on the back. 2 are at an angle. And 2 are on the front. And once the screws are out, you just lift up the back panel. On these old game systems, the AV cable was actually built into the system. And it actually goes through this bottom shell. So I had to kind of snake it out. Now this bottom shell is in extremely good condition. I was blown away that there's no dust. Hardly any dust anyways. No real gunk or junk. Now you just lift up gently on the board and pop it right out, because the levers and ports and things go right through the shell. This upper shell's in really good condition also. There's just some dust that's kind of wedged into the crevices and things like that. I'm just going to take it to the sink and give it a good scrubbing. So I rinsed this thing down with some nice warm water, and now I'm using a toothbrush and just some dishwashing soap to get in these fins. There's a lot of dust that's just settled into the cracks. Especially around this faceplate. There's a lot of little lips where like dust has just kind of wedged itself in. And along the little ports in the back. Really didn't have to hit it that hard. And after I rinsed it off, it looked fantastic. So on the back side of the board, there was some crusty junk, kind of like, looked like dried goo of some kind on the back side of the board. On the top, there was this piece of paper that was taped onto it. I'm not sure what that's for, but there was a number that was imprinted on it, but it was so faint I could barely read it. It looks like there was some sort of an aluminum foil tape that was around the toggle switches, and that was the first thing I decided to try and take off. The right side came off very easily. But the left side gave me a little more problems. I decided to use my tweezers to try and gently peel it up. This stuff was just so fragile that no matter how gentle I tried to be, I ended up mangling it. Next, I was going to try and take off this shield. It was held on by these little metal tabs that poke through the board from the bottom and then twisted in order to hold the 2 halves together. I was really trying to be as delicate as I possibly could, but this thing gave me a time. Finally, I was able to make some headway. And I was able to keep either one of the halves from being bent at all. Since the little twisted metal tabs gave me so much problem coming out, I decided to take a pair of pliers and straighten them out so that it'd be easier to put back together. Next, I started to clean the back. I just used rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip to try and get all of this junk off. I found in my experience when it comes to cleaning electrical stuff, just using some good old rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip works best. It's easy to get in between all of those pins and connectors, but this was a little slow going, so I tried using a toothbrush and hitting the whole entire thing at once. I don't usually like to try and do this because it has a tendency to fling stuff everywhere and really just make a mess. And on top of that, you're not really getting anything off. You're kind of loosening it up, busting it up, but you're not really pulling anything off of the board, which is why, once again, I like using Q-tips. It's a small, absorptive little head, just really sucks up all of that junk after you get done wiping it off and busting it loose. And then you just throw it in the trash and grab another one. The toothbrush worked good to get a lot of the thicker globules of whatever this stuff was off, but as I said, it wasn't really pulling anything up, and this stuff was just smearing everywhere. So I went back to the Q-tips. After I got the back all clean and looking real good, I flipped it over and started working on the front. The front was nowhere near as bad as the back. There was some dust and maybe a little residue, but other than that, it was just up for some fine cleaning. I wanted to wipe this shield down, and just to get the dust off of it, it was just a little bit dirty. Now it was time to tackle the cartridge slot. This thing is pretty much open to the air all the time, and so there's a bunch of dust that had fallen down inside of the little lip around the outside of where the cartridge makes contact with the heads. It was pretty gross down inside there. I got it cleaned out as best I could, and there was a little bit more way down at the bottom, but I couldn't reach it. It didn't really seem like it was bothering anything, and you couldn't tell unless you were looking for it. I couldn't find a way to clean the actual heads themselves, and I didn't want to try dismantling this thing. Now that I got it all cleaned up, spit shined and polished, it was time to put it back together. Having straightened out those fins, this thing went right back together, so much easier than it came apart. And with a little twist here and a twist there, the two halves were back together solid, and it looked great. I tried my best to salvage what was left of this metallic tape. It was pretty mangled from when I removed it. I knew it served some sort of a purpose, so I figured it was better to have it on there in its present state than to not have it at all. Next up was to put the little foam spacers back around these posts. I still can't believe how good of shape these things were in. No rips, no tears, pretty clean, and still had some squishiness left in them. One thing I'd noticed when I was taking it apart was that there were these little stays or a guide that were built into the lower shelf for the audio-video cable to kind of fit snugly inside of in order to keep it from tugging on the board itself. And they were not pressed into these little stays when I took it apart. So I wanted to make sure that I got them back into those so that in case it gets yanked on, it wouldn't put any stress on it. I think in doing this, it made it a little harder on myself because it is definitely easier putting the board into the top and then connecting the two together, but I eventually got it. And one quick check to make sure that everything was working, and it looked like they were. So it's time to flip it over and put the screws back in this bad boy. And there you have it. Cleaned up, reassembled, and ready to be played. Let's see how it does. And it still works. Alright, well that was fun. I enjoyed taking things apart, figuring out what's on the inside of them, figuring out how they work, what's going on inside of them, cleaning them up, finding ways to make them work better. That's something I'd like to do with all the rest of my video game systems. I'd like to make a comeback video for this one. You know, that tape that I kind of mangled? I'd like to replace that if I can. And also, I didn't really have a way to capture the video when I was playing the game. I don't know if you could tell, but I was just standing in front of my TV with my phone. I couldn't find a way to plug that system into my capture card. I know that there's a mod out there where you can add composite video to your Atari. You know, it's the red, white, yellow plugs. And I would like to be able to do that so that I could capture that video and be able to show you more cool games that I have. My dad told me one time, well, he told me and he taught me, that you never know what you're going to find whenever you start messing with something old. And that was 100% true with this video game system. It was a lot more work than I expected it to be, especially for something that was so simple. And I've dealt with that my whole entire life. You say to yourself, it's just a simple fix, and next thing you know, you've been to the hardware store 3 times and you have to buy a new tool, and it's always way more than you expect. I really like the inside of this system. I love how mechanical it was, the way the switches are very tactile. I hope you enjoyed the video. Stick around, I'm going to make a lot more.